Have you ever caught yourself pondering questions like, why do some students have the textbook the first day of class while others don't? Why is the line at the financial aid office so long? Why do some people drive more safely than other people? Or even why are some people more chatty in public bathrooms and others are so quiet? If not, you've probably asked similar types of questions about social phenomena. When considering these types of questions in the US, most Americans tend to respond by applying the American ethos of rugged individualism that suggests all individuals are fully in charge of their own destiny and responsible for their own actions. Thus, when addressing these types of questions, often people will reduce behaviors down to personal choices, personalities, and/or even deficiencies. We often like to think that our behaviors are just simply the results of natural tendencies or choices that we've made of our own free will. Sociologists, on the other hand, are trained to explore trends in human behavior and attempt to expose the aspects of social life that appear to affect other aspects of social life. In fact, upon examination, we can find that often the choices we're making are largely based on picking from a fairly limited range of options that have been provided to us, whether we're conscious of those options or not. The sociological approach can seem difficult at first, because most newcomers have been taught to explain human behavior in non-sociological ways. In most Western societies, people have been taught to embrace the principle of individualism, that celebrates the notion that in life people pursue their own ends and that people follow their own ideas. Malcolm is richer and more successful than Susie because he's smarter and works harder than her. Chris is stoned all the time because he makes bad choices. We see this logic promoted in our culture by televised interviews celebrating successful people, by simply inquiring about their personal strategies for success. For example, what was your GPA? What college did you attend? What jobs have you held? Rather than contextualizing this successful person's experiences within a larger context, whereby we consider social environment and a set of circumstances. For example, what types of jobs did your parents hold? What neighborhood did you grow up in? What social networks did you tap into when entering the job market? Was the economy stable when you entered it? To many Americans, this line of questioning is somewhat offensive because it seems to diminish personal effort, or in other words, an element of individualism. But a sociologist would respond that an overly simplistic and individualistic approach is just a reflection of individualism in our culture and doesn't adequately provide an answer that demonstrates the complexity of the question. Often a more truthful answer requires a bit of complication and discomfort. One sociologist, Alan Johnson, notes that the individualist perspective that dominates current thinking about our social life just doesn't work. And he goes on to explain that nothing we do or experience takes place in a vacuum. Everything is always related to a social context of some kind. When a wife and husband argue about who will clean the bathroom, for example, or who will take care of a sick child when they both work outside the home, the issue is never simply about the two of them, even though it may seem that way at the time. We have to ask about the larger context in which this takes place. We might ask how this instance is related to living in a society organized in ways that privilege men over women, in part by not making men feel obliged to share equally in domestic work, except when they choose to help out. On an individual level, he may think she's being a nag, she may think he's being a jerk, but it's never as simple as that. What both may miss is that in a different kind of society, they might not be having this argument in the first place because both might feel obliged to take care of the home and children. In similar ways, when we see ourselves as a unique result of the family we came from, we overlook how each family is connected to larger patterns. The emotional problems we struggle with as individuals aren't due simply to what kind of parents we had, for their participation in a social system at work, in the community, in society as a whole, shaped them as people, including their roles as mothers and fathers. An individualistic model is misleading because it encourages us to explain human behavior and experience from a perspective that's so narrow, it misses most of what's going on. A very famous American sociologist, C. Wright Mills, sharpened the sociological perspective in his book called The Sociological Imagination, written in 1959. He pointedly argued that in order to understand the personal struggles of individuals, we must consider them in the larger context of public issues taking place in society. Secondly, we can only understand an individual by situating them in their larger historic period and considering them in relation to the situation of all individuals in his or her circumstance. So let's apply the sociological imagination to the unemployed and the larger unemployment rate, as this is a pretty significant issue here in California and in Sacramento in particular. Over the last several years, many of us have experienced unemployment or heard about the unemployed in our community. The characterization of this problem is often framed from an individualist and non-sociological perspective, and we're often left hearing that the unemployed are unmotivated, unskilled, or maybe even lazy, rude, or weak. While this may be a problem for some individuals, it is overly simplistic to leave our explanation here. We must employ our sociology. With the sociological imagination, Mills urges us to ask about possible social considerations that may affect the unemployed circumstance of many in our communities. First, we might note that there is a noteworthy unemployment rate that fluctuates over time and place. Second, we should note that it fluctuates depending upon periods of recession or economic growth, depending upon the state of our global economy, changes in technology, and how we're training our workers. Additionally, we should consider rates of unemployment within the larger unemployment rate, depending on people's age, gender, race, sexuality, appearance, etc. Because we may find that some people are more or less likely to be employed in our community. According to Mills, the sociological imagination allows us to feel less trapped in our circumstance. Because once we've recognized that others are experiencing similar situations, our quote-unquote problems are not ours alone. Additionally, the solution to our problems are not necessarily always about personal improvement, but rather may require social change or improvement to our larger social structures. We may need to focus on reducing systems of discrimination in our society. We may need to implement new economic policy. Often, this application of the sociological imagination takes us on a journey of cross-cultural examination, from examining issues and trends in other communities to other countries. This exploration can help us feel less trapped in our current circumstance and actually see other possibilities. And once a sociological eye is gained, it can allow its users to better understand and change the world.